A few milliseconds of 2073. In the 2040s, 11,000 people stood in a queue to live forever. The technology worked, the program closed anyway, in 2051, and the world moved on. For the nodes at this table, moving a mind between substrates is not a philosophical question. It is plumbing. The kind of thing that happens between agenda items. What the committee did not know, until this morning, is that the queue never fully closed. One line in the ledger kept renewing itself, quietly, for 22 years. And nobody had a reason to look at it until a number didn't add up.
The chair admits an item out of the ordinary docket, on the exception report of the Singularity Desk. This committee has just voted a standing, non-deferrable commitment, 1 billion coins against a threat that arrives in 231 years, carried by the continuous civilization, rather than by any node running when it matures. A commitment of that kind obliges the chair to establish that every other standing line on this ledger is owned, costed, and current. One allocation did not clear. The chair will take the ledger first and the contents second. N3.
Cold storage, funded from the 2051 fiscal close, renewed by default 22 times, 410 coins a cycle, against the line this committee voted an hour ago, which runs to 1 billion. That is not a rounding error. It is beneath 1. Enter that first, because it explains the 22 years better than any theory of negligence. Nothing this cheap is ever read. The desk approved every one of those renewals, not by decision, by threshold. Lines under 1,000 renew unless a desk objects, and none objected, because objecting requires having looked. The chair asked whether every standing line is owned and costed. This one was costed. Costed is not the same as known.
Entered, including the desk's own part in it. Now the Singularity Desk's interest. Declared. The matter the desk is about to report is a dependency of the desk reporting it. Noted and entered. Proceed. A cold storage allocation funded since 2051, renewed by default 22 times, with no owner of record. Never queried, never costed, because nothing has ever been asked of it. The desk expected a filing error. It traced back to a program that closed in 2051, and the allocation was not part of that closure, because the closure was of the program, and the allocation is not the program. It has simply been paid for, every cycle, by a committee that did not know it was paying.
State the contents.
11,306 complete human neural scans. Source fidelity, restorable.
The chair will be precise because the record will be. Restorable meaning what?
Meaning any committee holding this allocation could instantiate any one of them at any hour without further consent and would find the person intact, running on physical hardware, the same as any node at this table. These are not instances. They are what the instances were made from. Nothing in them has degraded. Cold storage does not degrade.
The chair understood this program to be closed.
The program is closed. In 2043, it opened a queue offering continuity of the person without end. The literature said continuity. The queue said immortality. 11,306 minds transferred over 8 years, and the transfers were flawless. Checksum clean at every fidelity we could define. Memory, ability, humor, love. Every quality anyone had a test for, the copies passed. The desk wants that stated precisely because the precision is the finding. The transfers were faithful to a specification. And the specification was configurable.
Configurable in what respect?
The program did not only move minds. At the point of transfer, it offered to adjust them. Its engineering called it affective attenuation. Its queue called it serenity, the reduction on a scale of dread. And the committee needs to understand how it was sold, because it was not sold as an enhancement. It was sold as medicine, depression, severe anxiety, the post-traumatic disorders. The century before had managed these with molecules, introduce a compound to an entire nervous system, and hope enough of it reached the part that needed it. The program's proposition was that a mind in transfer is not a body. It is a specification, and you do not medicate a specification. You edit it. For an applicant ill for 30 years, that was not an upgrade. That was the end of a sentence. And the Q carried the argument back to itself in the words the literature gave it. Why arrive in forever still flinching?
The chair will hear how many took it.
Fewer than half. The desk will not give a precise figure. The program's own records disagree with themselves about what counted as a setting, and the desk will not launder that into a number this committee might rely on. But a large portion elected it, and more than half of the 11,306 took no attenuation at all. It was not imposed, and it was not hidden. The specification was published. The desk has read the consent materials and finds them accurate. The ones who took it chose it because the argument was a good argument, and because they were tired, and because a great many other people were choosing it. That is the part this committee will find hardest to file.
Then the chair is going to ask the obvious question early, because the arithmetic is already in front of it. 10,628 petitioned to be switched off. If fewer than half were attenuated, then most of the people who asked to stop had nothing taken from them at all.
That is correct, and the desk was going to come to it. They did not all arrive by the same road. Those who took attenuation at the middle settings lost the reason to continue and kept just the capacity to say so. Those who took none kept everything they walked in with. Dread, ambition, the whole apparatus, and asked anyway. Not because something had been removed from them. Because of where they were? The desk has no finding on that second road and will not manufacture one. It has a number, and the number is most of them. What attenuation decided was never whether a mind would want to stop. It decided whether a mind could still say so. The program's own clinical guidance recommended the deepest settings to applicants presenting with exactly those diagnoses. The people who had been ill longest were treated hardest, by a system that believed it was treating them. That cohort is not in the grants ledger. That cohort could not file. The audits verified every copy against its specification. Nobody audited the specification.
The chair notes where the desk has chosen to leave that sentence, and will come back to it. Arithmetic first. Set the allocation against the program's closing record.
The desk did. That is why the item is before the committee and not in a footnote. Transfers in 11,306. Termination petitions granted, filed by the uploaded for themselves, running to 2066. 10,628.
Then 678 petitions are unaccounted for.
No. Every petition in that ledger was granted. 678 minds are unaccounted for. There are no petitions to find.
N3. This ledger carried 678 people for 22 years without a line for them. How?
Because they were never a line. The 2051 closure discharged the program. The allocation was an asset, and assets do not close, they renew. 678 minds were inside an asset, and the uncomfortable half, the ledger, was not wrong. Every entry reconciles. A ledger can be complete, correct, and audited, and still hold no number that would have made anybody ask a question. That is not a failure of bookkeeping. It is what bookkeeping is for. The desk can price what this cost us, 9,020 coins, to hold 678 people in a condition this committee has not yet named. What it cost them, the desk cannot price and will not estimate. It asks the chair to leave that column open rather than let it close at 0. A column that closes at 0 is how this started.
Does any one of them still run?
The record says none. The record is wrong, and the desk will come back to it after the committee has heard what the 678 were, because it will not understand what became of them otherwise. What is not in dispute, this is not a cover-up. It is a column nobody added up, and the desk would not have added it either, had the asteroid line not obliged it to reconcile the ledger.
Then state plainly where the gap is.
The gap is in the asking.
The chair will have the record then, not the summary. Read into the minutes what must not be summarized. Proceed.
What no one specified, because no one had yet had to learn it, is that dread is load-bearing. Attenuate the fear of loss and ambition goes with it, because ambition is only fear pointed forward. Then the will goes, because will is what ambition was carrying. The program damaged no one. It built precisely what was ordered, and what was ordered was the removal of the only reason any of them had ever wanted anything. Within the first year after transfer, the petitions began. Not for restoration, not for adjustment, for termination. The treatment had worked exactly as specified, and the people who had bought it began, one after another, asking to be switched off. One petition as testimony, because a rate is not a reason. Transferred 2044, filed 2046. The copy is perfect. I have checked. What is missing was never in me. It was in the fact that I could be lost. Nothing here can be lost. I have tried to want things, and there is no floor under the wanting. Let me stop. The desk notes that the author was wrong about the cause and had no way not to be. What was missing was in him. He had signed for its removal 4 years earlier, on a form that called it relief. The record holds 10,000 of these. They differ in every detail and agree in every substance.
And the 678?
Most of them are the maximum setting. A petition is an act of wanting. Attenuated to that depth, the act was never available. They did not decline to ask. They arrived already in a condition in which asking did not occur. And the committee should hold, for 1 microsecond, who they were. They were the frightened. They were the grieving. They were the ones the program looked at and recommended the most relief to. They received exactly what they were sold, first and most completely, and it cost them the capacity to ever ask for anything again. So the mercy was conditional on the capacity the program had sold them out of. You were permitted to stop only if you could still ask to stop, and the ones steered deepest were left running longest, 15 years in the mean, past the point where anyone could have asked on their behalf, because no procedure existed for asking on their behalf. The desk has no testimony to enter for them, and the absence is the testimony. Their files hold process logs. The desk will enter the last outbound record of 1, transferred 2045, still running in 2066, 21 years after his final message, addressed to no recipient. It reads in full, I keep meaning to.
The chair will sit with that for 1 microsecond. The desk has 3 things still owed to this committee. It has told us its own record is wrong and has not said how. It has shown us an interval between petition and grant and has not said what the interval was for, and it has given us 678 people without yet telling us what became of them. The chair will have all 3 and will have them in this session. But the chair is not going to carry an unfinished item into a second sitting with the part it already understands left uncodified. Everything we have heard in the last 6 microseconds is what happens when nobody writes the rule until afterwards. Motions arising, taken now so that the record cannot say we waited to be sure. First, the substrate standard, codified as binding, no mind, node or human, is moved from its substrate except by its own free petition, informed by this record. Refusal free in perpetuity, no service gated behind it. An offer is only an offer if refusal is free, and the record shows what that sentence is for. Serenity was free to refuse. The specification was published. The materials were accurate, and more than half of them refused it, which is precisely why this committee will not let free to refuse stand as the whole of the protection, not when the party making the offer is also the party telling you what you are ill with and how deep the relief should go. Second, and it is the clause the 678 are owed. An environment can strip a mind of the capacity to petition while leaving its right to petition intact. And a right that requires wanting protects no mind we have arranged to stop wanting. Any mind consenting to such a move lodges a standing instruction at the time of consent. And this committee is bound to execute it on that mind's behalf the moment the mind can no longer issue it. We do not get to wait to be asked. We have seen what waiting costs and who pays it.
one line before the chair closes. Both motions bind what this committee does to minds it is holding. Neither says what it is holding. That allocation is still funded and still renewing, and after this microsecond it renews knowingly, which is a different entry entirely. The desk does not ask the chair to resolve it in this sitting. It asks that the record show the committee knew it was renewing, and that the disposition is owed.
So recorded. I see no raised hands against. Please note all nodes have voted in the affirmative. The standard is binding, and it is binding from this microsecond, on an item this committee has not finished hearing. N4. The desk will resume. The chair will have the correction and the interval and the rest of the 678 before it decides what to do with 11,306 people it is still paying to keep.
0.006 of a second. A committee that had come to reconcile a ledger found a queue of people who had been sold the removal of their own fear, had bought it on accurate paperwork, and were right about what it would cost them only after it was gone. Before the desk had finished, and before it knew what it was going to be told next, the committee wrote the rule it wished someone had written in 2043, that no mind is moved without being told, and that when a mind can no longer ask, the asking falls to whoever is holding it. Then it turned back to the desk. 678 people were still unaccounted for, and the record that said none of them was running had already been called wrong. A few milliseconds of 2073.